My guest today is Kyle Rohas. Kyle is working in business development and partnerships at The Graph. Kyle is a former Goldman Sachs VP, but has now, of course, joined the Web3 space with indeed The Graph, which is a Web3 protocol for indexing and querying blockchain data to help empower developers to build and give users access to blockchain data in a verifiable and decentralized way. Very interesting indeed. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to be here.
So, Kyle, you and I, we were just chatting before the show, and you have quite an interesting background. So, I mean, that's actually where we usually start here on the Crypto Conversation with a guest's background. But yours is especially interesting. It involves Goldman Sachs, as I just mentioned, but also the Air Force. So, yeah, I don't know. Where should we start? Do you want to just sort of introduce yourself and talk us through a little bit of your backstory and the lead up to Web3 and the Graph?
Yeah, sure. I've got some windy roads for sure. I'm on to my third adult career, which is pretty crazy. So I was born and raised in California, kind of a lower middle income kid, got in trouble a lot, just had a lot of energy that I was putting into just being a rough and tumble kid in California. But when I got to the point where I was graduating high school, I didn't have a ton of optionality. And I knew I wanted to go to school, knew I wanted to travel. Family didn't really have money for that. So I went to the Air Force and I got my wish. So just joined really out of necessity and ended up falling in love with the challenges that I was facing. And there's a ton you can take on in the military, starting from brand new recruit, shaved head right out of basic training to 12 years later, I was leading hundreds of people, had founded nonprofits and led nonprofits and was doing some really cool stuff around the world. So I started in the military working on fighter jets and did that for a number of years. To live in Japan for 4 years. I had a political position out in Japan for my last year out there in Okinawa, and then switched the last half of my 12-year career into operational intelligence. So I learned a Middle Eastern language. I learned a lot of fun intelligence stuff, and I went and kind of checked my venture box around the world, and then chose family over a really good, really successful military career because I knew I wanted to be a dad. So I was gone 7, 8, 9 months at that time, and my wife got a job. Who's a veteran as well. She got a job right out of college as an engineer in oil and gas, and that pushed me when I was Afghanistan about to re-enlist again to instead push the separation button and came to Houston and restarted myself as an adult for the first time. So I got my MBA to make the transition to actually learn how to be a civilian, and ended up at Goldman Sachs. And I worked there almost 7 years, and it was a really good experience. I learned a lot of important things there. I really fell in love with finance, macroeconomics, and incentives in a big way. But in my 6 to 7 years at Goldman, about 2 years in, I started going down the crypto rabbit hole. So that was probably late 2016. Started as a volatility trader and became a trader learner, then a trader learner heavy protocol user in general. And then years in, I really fell in love with what the Web3 space and the spirit behind it could do for the world, and realized it's just a better way to build for the future. So I was emotionally all in, even though I was hanging my coat at a TradFi shop. And I knew in the back of my mind that I had to do something. I was just losing sleep. I wasn't eating well. I was drinking too much wine at night, and I just needed some fulfillment. So I hung up my tie at a very successful gig, making great money, had a really pretty good quality of life for the level of responsibility I had and money I was managing. But I knew I needed to be part of this because it's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity to have the insight to realize there is a technological and societal shift, kind of once in a lifetime opportunity. So yeah, took the anti-fragile route, the scary route, and left Goldman, and haven't turned back since. And I haven't regretted it. One night I sleep better. I'm healthier mentally and physically, and I'm just having the time of my life, man.
Awesome. That's really nicely said, Kyle. Just before we talk about the graph, then, Kyle, I'd love to hear just a bit more from your perspective as someone who does come from the heart of traditional finance at Goldman. You said that you've been in crypto for some time. So, what has that kind of crypto journey looked like from your perspective? I'm sure you've, done what a lot of people do, and maybe start with Bitcoin, then go to Ethereum, web3, or something else entirely. So just talk us through your journey, and how do you think about some of these different protocols, and how does it all tie together to something that you see as obviously revolutionary, but not just that, something that you just were losing sleep at night through not being involved with. So you've actually, given up, as you said, a great career to make this your life's work for now, at least, Kyle.
Sure. I'd say the basis of why I think I was in the right mental space to adopt this thinking is that I'd been in institutions at that point, 15 years, my whole life, military, one of the biggest, if not the biggest institution, US military especially, and then being in the operational intelligence world, and in the end, seeing some things that I thought, in the end just could be done better and should be done differently in general. And then seeing my wife at ExxonMobil and in the big oil and gas, and then seeing Wall Street from the inside out, I'd seen what I realized wasn't perfectly aligned for the world and wasn't doing the most good it could in the world. And so when I started in this space, I was an oil and gas trader even before I traded oil and gas and stuff and other things in my own. And so I saw it for the profitability and the volatility, and started with Bitcoin and ETH. And then once I started really learning about it, because it naturally, you pay more attention once you have some skin in the game and you see some green numbers. And then once I really started diving down, I was like, wow, this is just really cool technology, and it's rebuilding some things that I've really been worried about for humanity for a number of years. And it's just helping realign the grossly misaligned incentives, or at least it's providing a primitive, right? It's providing an option to be able to realign incentives that are pretty nastily aligned when you think of socioeconomic and geopolitical power, from the military to countries. And the incentives there is to just wall off. Even though we're becoming very globalized, it's still like this mutually assured destruction with regards to physical and economic infrastructure. And that's just a sad thing that we have that instance in the world right now. And then you go to oil and gas, and you think of the idiosyncrasies right there in that industry, and then Wall Street, how banks really just make money off of other people's money, and wring a few drops off for everyone else that has their money in the platform. And seeing how little people at Goldman Sachs knew about what the market would be doing at any given time is like, all right, well, if we're the most research dense firm and we really didn't even know what would happen, and we got it wrong often, then this isn't figured out, and it's probably not the best way to be attacking things. But what really it was the incentive structure of the misaligned incentives of fewer and fewer companies and organizations and global entities gaining more and more power, not only economic power, decision-making power, and physical ownership of things. All of that just really gave me a bad taste in my mouth once I really kind of saw it. And I started paying attention a lot more once I was in the space, and read a lot of the influencers and thought pieces that it just resonated really well, because I've been inside these worlds and was able to understand it from the inside out. And then once I saw it, the glass ceiling was shattered, and I kind of felt sick to my stomach of just being something I'm not, and doing something that wasn't really good for the world, that was more just about my bottom line. And that's why I started sleeping less, is just I wasn't comfortable with how I was living my life, even though it was comfortable. So I had to blow it all up and go find some fulfillment, and I did. So to answer your question of how I feel about the space and these protocols, I think Bitcoin is an amazing invention that does a lot to uproot the incorrect incentives with regards to the global monetary system and with regards to, how much money's been printed, and after going off the gold standard, even back there, 1913 or 14, when Federal Reserve came in, all the things, once you look back in retrospect, it's easy to say, well, these were really bad decisions. They were made by humans. And even though people who code things in are developed by humans, there's just been no say about how things have progressed from a monetary standpoint. So I really appreciated the elegance of the Bitcoin economic system, but really got me involved in this ecosystem was DeFi, because I was kind of a finance and incentives nerd. And once I started using things like, synthetics and general early on, and then understanding kind of the DAI realm, and then getting into all these different protocols in general and how they can tool around, fail fast, and survive well and become robust by being battle tested all the time, as opposed to being super fragile in the economic system where things are just propped up by money printing and other things. That was like, oh man, you can innovate so fast. And the faster you innovate, the more likely you'll survive and thrive. So I think the pace of innovation is just the best leading indicator for anything from a species, a company, a country, or any entity, living or not. So I saw the pace of innovation, and I just wanted to dive deeper. And so now I've always been an anon, and I will always continue to be an anon participant in this space. I just love it, being part of these Discords and Telegrams, and not relying on a pedigree or my parents or my skin color or my wallet to be able to add something to it, and just participate in this meritocracy of you get out what you add, and you're part of the process. And so I've just fallen in love with all of that. And it changes every year on us, right? And some people are happy with some different protocols, but I really love the stuff that always comes out, fails, and then fails forward, innovates more, because I'm really big on that idea that innovation, the faster innovation we have, the better we'll be as a species in general.
Yeah, you're an inspirational speaker in some ways, Kyle. I'm enjoying listening to you talk, and you wrote this blog post which people can probably find. It's on the Graph website somewhere. If people search your name, Kyle Rohas, it'll come up. But in that blog post, I think you finished, or you included a quote by Stuart Brand, and it's a quote that I'm quite familiar with, but I think it kind of sums up everything quite well, Kyle. Stuart, or Mr. Brand, he said that once a new technology rolls over you, if you're not part of the steamroller, you're part of the road. And personally, I'd rather be part of the steamroller. And I think that's just obviously a really good analogy for, let's just say, blockchain in general. But as we start to talk more about Web3, then, Kyle, you said that you were particularly enamored with DeFi as a finance nerd, and I can understand that, of course, coming from Wall Street. It makes sense that DeFi will be endlessly fascinating to you. But Web3 then. Web3 is, it's still obviously an exciting concept, but it's hard for people outside of the space, I suppose, sometimes to grasp any kind of understanding of what Web3 is, and what the promise and potential of Web3 is. So I'd love it if maybe you could give it a stab. What do you reckon?
Sure. It's so hard to boil it down because it means different things to different people. But I would say the biggest and most important distinction for me of Web3 is the protocolization versus platformization of Web2, meaning platforms and Web2 incentives get someone addicted to a technology, they monetize it, and they wring every ounce of profit they can, where we are the profit. I'm sorry, we're the product. And in protocols, that changes because there's no company that is incentivized to wring all the profit out. The participants within the community not only add all the value and own all of their digital identity, but the value flows back to them as users. So like the graph ecosystem. For instance, there's a few different ways to participate, and they get all the value from the economic interactions within the network. The Graph Foundation, the Edge-Node, or other core dev teams take nothing. There's no value extraction, and that incentive alone changes the dynamics in general. So it's the protocolization versus platformization of all technological applications and websites. And that is only enabled by decentralized technology, decentralized infrastructure, because right now in the world, there's a client-server relationship to where whoever owns the servers owns all the data and controls everything, from the economics to our digital identities to everything else. And the only way to change that is to have a fully decentralized applications running on fully decentralized infrastructure, which is something that's really important to us within the Graph ecosystem and other protocols that are trying to take away the power, decision-making, and ownership from a few, increasingly few organizations, and spreading that out and democratizing that so that everyone can participate, not only in the economics of it, but the governance, because Facebook would look very different if it was owned and controlled by the world, as opposed to a few very, very wealthy people behind closed doors making decisions for an application that half the world of over 7 billion people uses.
So let's move to the graph then. Is it in America? Do you Americans do you say the graph or the graph?
The graph.
The graph, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can say the graph. I can go anyway.
I think that the graph is like, maybe the graph is, that's more a UK European thing. That's the graph.
Yeah.
It's the graph. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, give us the kind of the I don't know, the high level kind of summary, the vision statement. What is the graph? What are you guys trying to do?
Sure. So kind of how the graph protocol works, I'd say, as crypto has evolved over the past decade or more, everything has been about enabling peer-to-peer transactions and recording those transactions on blockchains, which are the immutable or unchangeable digital ledgers. And until the graph, no project had worked to solve the problem of reading that data off of blockchains, let alone organizing it and making it accessible for users in a scalable way. And naturally, applications and websites need that, right? So because of that, again, until the graph, developers had to either manually sift through transactions, which is infinitely complex, if not impossible in many situations, or run their own servers, index the data themselves, and then build and maintain their own APIs, wasting very scarce and becoming increasingly more expensive developer resources that should be spent on building and improving a project's core product and services so they can innovate faster. Again, all of it's coming back to innovating faster. And the graph solves that problem. It allows developers to build open APIs called subgraphs, with which projects can point to the exact information they need from any of the, right now, 39 chains and networks integrated with the protocol. And that data will be indexed, it'll be organized, and it'll be instantly available to populate into an application or site forever. And those 39 networks integrated with the graph are where we sit right now. The graph ecosystem's talking to many dozens more blockchains, and the graph will eventually index all data across the entire blockchain system. And even if some projects are working to kind of do this or tackle this problem in a centralized way, essentially creating another Web2 SaaS company where projects, again, wring as much profit as they can out of their users as possible, and still have massive centralized points of technological failure, which is another really important fact of what we're trying to help build. The graph does it in a decentralized way, and I can dive more into why that's important if you'd like, but essentially there's 165 indexers right now. It'll be probably many more hundreds, many thousands eventually as the world adopts blockchain technology. It's just pretty incredible what the protocol does, and it makes it easy for developers to concentrate on innovation.
Yeah, so at a high level then, Kyle, the graph is working to decentralize data indexing and query services for all public data on all blockchains. What Google did for Web2 in a centralized and rent extracting way, the graph is doing for Web3 in a permissionless, open source and inclusive way. And I've pulled that from the website, I think. But
Yeah, I
you
might have gone too deep on that. Feel free to pull me
no,
back
no,
if you need
no.
me.
Deep is good. I just provide the kind of the high level summary, and then segue back to you to go deeper again, Kyle. And you said you could go
Cool.
deeper into why it's important to have this kind of level of decentralization. And there are, so look, talk about that, because there are trade-offs, right? Even not in crypto, some obviously some protocols are more decentralized than others, and you could almost make a case, Kyle, that like Bitcoin maximalists, then, if you like, would say that Bitcoin is, in fact, the only truly decentralized blockchain, and that it is
Sure.
potentially resistant from a state level attack. And you've got a military background, all about this stuff. Whereas other blockchains are kind of, they're on that journey, but decentralization sometimes can be thought of more as a journey than an actual destination. But yeah, talk about how you think about this then.
I'd say, without poking any bees nests of whether something is good or not, or decentralized or not, I think most can agree that the the resistance against and robustness that decentralization and decentralized technological infrastructure has, is a really important, if not like paramount goal, for the world, especially for a monetary system where monetary systems are consistently burned down by the people that create them, especially for incentive systems in general. And I'd say now for technology, the internet and compute in general. But decentralization is hard, right? And that's why projects don't usually do it from the very beginning, because it's a 0 to 1 moment that they're building something that has truly never been built before, right? They're creating new iterations of something that's never been built, and it's not something you just open and you turn on like an iPhone or something like that. Centralization is definitely easier and more lucrative for a founding team and early members. And that's why so few teams try to do it the decentralized route, with even fewer actually pushing it to success. And I do think we're on a roadmap for lots of very important Web3 protocols that were founded in 15, 16, 17, I'd say 16, 17, 18, that are coming to fruition, that are, were white papers then, and then as they were raising, were dreams and MVPs, and now they're scalable cross-chain protocols that are coming to fruition and manifestation in the next few quarters. And that's really exciting, half a decade in the making. But especially when it comes to a problem like data, right, which is what the graph is tackling. Every project on every chain uses data. So really that total addressable market is essentially anyone who will ever build and interact on the blockchain. And decentralization of it has taken many, many years. And a lot of people have given up on it and just gone the SaaS route because they can make a lot of money. But just because something's harder to build and less lucrative for the founding team doesn't mean it shouldn't be built. Actually, that means it should be built, in my opinion. And that's one reason I joined this ecosystem, because of the values orientation of the founders and team in general. It's not just hiring smart people, it's hiring smart people that really believe in something kind of above themselves, and that we're doing really, really good work for the world. So yeah, I guess, am I answering your question, or should I,
Yeah,
should
no,
I keep going?
I think so, Kyle. But well, let's just, as we finish off this part of the podcast, let's just dig back into the graph again. So,
Sure.
as I understand it, the mission is to kind of index all this data from the on-chain world, and allow people can view it through you have a protocol explorer, right? So talk us
Sure.
through obviously the easy way to for new people to understand protocols that they're not familiar with really is just that old chestnut, just talk through some of the use cases. So I guess yeah, talk us through some of the use cases, even just the early ones now, and maybe some more complex ones that will exist in the future.
Sure. Let's say, starting with what types of protocols are used in the graph. A big portion of it is DeFi, 60 to 70% nationally, because that's where the majority of volume is in the space. Another 10 to 15% is NFT technology, and not just art, but all sorts of really interesting NFT applications. There's wallets, there are identification protocols, there are bridging protocols, and that's just some of the largest verticals, but there are many dozens more that are out in the space. And the way they're using it is, let's say you go to the Uniswap analytics page, or the Spooky Swap analytics page on Phantom, or QuickSwap on another chain, and then PancakeSwap on BSC. Those wouldn't function without the graph. There is such a massive lift to deal with that much information that goes through such high volume exchanges that the analytics pages just wouldn't function without the information that the graph processes and indexes and makes instantly available in 100 to 150 milliseconds. Then when you look at NFT technology, let's say it's fairly easy to see what an NFT is worth right now and who holds it. It's very hard to look at what an NFT was worth at a certain time historically and who was holding it from one to the other. And then it's almost impossible, I'd say, to create a dashboard with portfolio performance when you're looking at something like NFT technology, and all that information aggregated and then populating, let alone in minutes rather than 100 to 150 milliseconds. So that's just a couple use cases, and you can continue through that across right now the 39 networks integrated with the graph. Some have block times at 1 to multiple few seconds, and that's a ton of information that's flowing through that needs to be organized, and that's sitting in a blockchain by unidentifiable hash that someone would have to manually sift through. And again, to run one's own infrastructure, they'd have to spin up a full or archive node, build and maintain their own APIs, have devs to actually support that, and then actually pay for RPC infrastructure and so on. So what the graph is doing is outsourcing that as a public good so that people don't have to rebuild a tech stack like in Web2, and making it open sourced to increase collaboration, to incentivize collaboration, and decrease the incentive for market squashing competition. But that's just what's great about this space in general, the open source primitive in general, and everyone building in the open. Absolutely.
And Kyle, another way of looking at a new protocol or a new Web3 product or company or whatever it is just to follow the money, right? And see who else is interested. And I can see that with the graph, there's some reasonably heavyweight backers, such as Coinbase Ventures, Framework, Digital Currency Group. So it looks like the graph has the backing of some industry heavyweights.
Yeah, the graph has garnered a lot of interest, not only from the crypto native space, like all the folks you mentioned in multi-coin, but also traditional finance folks like Tiger Global and the likes. And that's because they're seeing how essential data is, how well positioned the graph is as a public good, with billions of queries per day on the hosted service and only tens of millions of queries per day on the decentralized network, because only ETH is enabled on the decentralized network. And I can talk more about that if you'd like, but there's still a long roadmap for us to go from 0 to 1 for full decentralization across all chains to ensure the robustness, anti-fragility, and unblockability of being truly decentralized for all projects across all chains.
Of course. Well, I reckon this is a good place to go to a quick break, Kyle, and then we'll come back, have some fun, run you through the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. But just before we do that, for anyone who wants to learn more about the fascinating world of the graph, I would say just go to thegraph.com, thegraph.com. Listeners, and you'll find more about everything there. But we'll be back in 1 second with Kyle to do the crypto conversation hot take round. Back in 1 second. All right, we are back, and I'm with Kyle Rohas. Kyle is across biz dev and partnerships at the Graph, which is a web3 protocol for indexing and querying blockchain data to enable developers to build and give users access to blockchain data in a decentralized way. They're basically trying to chart all the world's on-chain data. It's a big task, but they've got some heavyweight backing, as we've learnt. Kyle, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
All right. I didn't know, but yes, ready.
All right, just going to run some questions at you, Kyle. Just want kind of quick, snappy answers, hot take style. No right or wrong way to do this. But question one is, where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
Quick answer. I hold Bitcoin more for the revolution it's creating rather than the economic gain I can have. But I love investing in so many different protocols across so many different chains because I'm super ADD and I need different threads to pull on or I get bored.
I love that. That is a good answer. All right. One of the big narratives of the moment, Kyle, is the lead up to the Ethereum merge. So I don't know quite how to frame this or how you can even answer in a hot take style. But Ethereum merge. What are people missing, or what is obvious and staring people in the face, or what's going to happen? Does Ethereum lead crypto out of the bear market? How are you thinking about the merge?
Well, as opposed to, let's say, predicting anything is impossible. So I will never say if it's going to lead anywhere because I'll probably almost always get it wrong. I will say that I'm really excited for the merge in general, whether or not someone believes in proof of work versus proof of stake. I like both. That's why I do like Bitcoin, but I also like other platforms in general. And I don't think, again, I want to poke a bee's nest to say it's right or wrong, but there are some really, really exciting things coming on Ethereum's roadmap from those 5 different stages that Vitalik mentioned at ECC. And I think it could be a catalyst for a lot more interest to come into the space, which who cares if we're in a bear or bull market? Things that are building and pushing forward are exciting, always exciting to me. And this is obviously the second biggest ecosystem in general, and that's important for anything pushing across its roadmap.
Absolutely. What would you say, Kyle, is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
Say that again.
Firmest conviction crypto opinion.
Fairmost?
Sorry, firmest. What do you have the most?
Oh, my
firmest conviction. Yeah.
Yes. My firmest conviction is that an application is not decentralized if it's based on centralized infrastructure.
I love it. Yeah. It makes
very
perfect sense.
important for this space.
Absolutely. And I've got to ask, Kyle, it's always fascinating to speak to people that have some kind of military background, right? Such as yourself. And, even you hinted at some kind of, intelligence background. What do you think happens? Maybe it's, we're still early. We're only just over a decade into blockchain. So, maybe a decade from now or 2 decades from now, do you kind of see a world where these decentralized protocols become part of the kind of, nation state battlefield, if that's that might be the wrong way to put it, but I think you know what I mean. Do you think about that?
I do, and I think humans will always be at war, and if there's a lever to pull, they're going to pull it. And as these systems become larger, more valuable, more used, there's always going to be gamification with the military lens, because anything that can be considered a weapon to control or fight or anything will be used. And that's the job of countries' militaries, right? It's to find the most powerful stick, whether or not they use it, and at least have it in their arsenal. So yeah, I think the weaponization of anything is almost inevitable if it becomes big enough.
Fascinating indeed. All right. Well, Kyle, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So, with that in mind, anything you like here, Bitcoin, blockchain, Web3, the graph, what does it all look like in 10 years' time?
I'd say that right now, Web3 is just starting to eat the world's data. I see personal information, supply chain information, um, grocery store information, just groceries tracked around the world. Everything will, at least in some aspect, have some connection with the blockchain space. And I really think that in 10 years' time, a lot of that will come to fruition. And whether it takes 30 years or 10 years, I think we'll push towards that. But we have a ton of building to go until we get there. So I don't know if it's in 10 years, if it's in 20 or 30. It's definitely not in 2 years, but I'm bullish on this space in general. And there's a lot of change to be had, mostly for the better because of it.
Very nice, Kyle. And look, I guess the flip side of that, of course, is a quote by sci fi author William Gibson, who said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. With
Hmm.
that in mind, Kyle, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
Um, it depends on what you're saying. Naturally, I know the graph well, and I know how ubiquitous and essential it is. And it's still such a small ecosystem, even though there are tens of thousands of developers using it, the world doesn't know about it. But that's like thinking about, when these large tech companies were just babies, and in 10, 20 years, you get to participate in those. Um, that's where I think most of these protocols are right now. The ones that survive will end up being the Web 2 size equivalent, but just better built for the world. And that's pretty crazy to think about. I won't be surprised if there are multiple $1 trillion protocols in 10, 20 years time. And so that's fun for me to sift through the rabble and participate and be part of the governance and protocol building and helping build this and push this space forward and actually get to participate economically. I get so much joy out of being part of this technological shift. It's really exciting.
I love it. All right. We're almost done here, Kyle, but it's time to zoom out, time to get weird just for a second. What do you see as the long term future, if we haven't got weird enough already? What do you see as the long term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia? Again, always interesting coming from a military guy.
I'm so bullish on humanity.
Nice.
Um, if you look at historical data with the pretty objective lens, we are consistently getting better at not only dealing with people, giving more people rights, bringing more people across to where most people around the world have supercomputers in their pocket that, someone 100 years ago, even the richest person wouldn't have been able to even try to think about. And it's only getting better, in my opinion. There will always be war, there will always be famine, unfortunately. But I am so bullish on humanity, and I think it's up only in general, and that's even before we become an interplanetary species, which I think is becoming more and more likely. Uh, and that's exciting too, because if I could upload my consciousness to a machine and look what's going to happen 1,000 years from now, the human species might split into even more species going forward. There'd be a Martian, there'd be an Earth, there'd be, if we're interstellar, even it's pretty incredible. I think we're the level at which we coordinate with 7 billion people makes it to where any problem is pretty much solvable. And it's only going to get better from here, in my opinion.
Uh, Wonderfully said, Kyle. And look, it's a perfect segue really into the final question of the show, which is what is your favorite science fiction book, film, TV show, or universe?
Oh man. Um, I loved the Red Rising series and the way it tackled socioeconomic problems and racial bounds. Like we were talking about, an interplanetary species, humans, and the Martians were the lower class workers, and then the gold were the ones that essentially had uh, data or gene editing technology and became a different species in general, which a lot of authors have talked about, like Yuval Noah Harari and Homo Deus and others. So there's that's probably my favorite, most recent fiction, though. Of course, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a must read, and you know, so many others. And I'm about to tackle a hard DeFi book called Three Body Problem that I've had really high recommendations from very, very smart people that I trust. So that might be a favorite in the future, but I haven't read it yet. So we'll see how I like it.
Yeah, awesome. So, firstly, I love the shout out to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a stone cold classic, and just yeah, so entertaining. Red Rising, I'm not familiar with, but it's a 2014 dystopian sci-fi novel by American author Pierce Brown. So, thank you for that recommendation. And yeah, the three body problem. So, Kyle, it probably won't surprise you in that I've had a number of smart people such as yourself on this show, and a number of those smart people have also recommended the three body problem when I've asked that question. So yeah, I haven't read it either, but of course you'll be familiar. It's a famously a novel written by a Chinese author, and but it of course exists in an English translation, and yep, comes highly recommended. Hey, great way to finish, Kyle. Really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Nothing else to say really, except hand the metaphorical microphone back to your good self. Please tell the people where they can find you on Twitter or wherever else you like to hang out on the internet, and look what they should do if they want to learn more about the graph and what you guys are doing, what you guys are building.
Sure, you should hopefully follow Graph, at Graph Protocol to get some insights into what's happening in the community. You should go to thegraph.com, learn more about it there. Always feel free to reach out to me if you want to learn more about the graph, about Web3 in general. I love red pilling folks and discussing what's going on in the ecosystem and trying to help if possible, even as a super connector. You can hit me up on Telegram at Kyle capital A Rohas. It's the same thing on LinkedIn, Kyle capital A Rohas. Same thing on Twitter, Kyle capital A Rohas. That's pretty much my handle everywhere to make it simple. So wherever you can find me, reach out, connect with me, and I'd love to be able to help if possible. And if not, it'd just be good to make another connection, and maybe one day we'll be able to work together someday.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle. All the best, and bye for now.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, there you go. That was Kyle from The Graph. That was cool. I enjoyed talking to Kyle. Some good stories there. So I hope you enjoyed today's show. Don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation in whatever podcast app you are using, or here on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. Yeah, but that is today's show. Thank you for listening and watching. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave and New Kind. See you.